organization. At the lowest level, the farmer himself was a commando. He had weapons of his own, as well as some that may have been issued by the state during this period. He also had a two-way radio system called Marnet, with which he kept in contact with the other members of the local commando. A number of farmers or households within the same area were then organized into a cell. The leader of the cell was elected by its members, and he ensured that the communication lines were always open and in order. He also had a direct communication link with the local police station. But with the police force stretched thin in rural areas, farmers relied on each other for a quick reaction force in the event of a farm attack. For this reason, a commando cell would plan for certain contingencies before they happened. The local commando officers would then assist these cells with the drawing up of these contingency plans. Above the cell and cell leader level, the cells were administered under district local commando units. Each district commando unit, or each district commando, had its own unique shoulder patch and unit colors. It was commanded by a professional officer from the army. These commando units would serve only in their respective areas and were an integral part of local security and the maintenance of law and order. Each district commando was grouped with its neighboring commandos into a group. These groups were then administered by a group headquarters. The commando groups, in turn, were then grouped together under a regional command. Each regional command represented a geographic area of South Africa. Let's take a closer look. Starting with the Cape Town region, the entry and birthplace for a lot of South African history, we have two Oceans Commando, Cape Flats Commando, False Bay Commando, Koeberg Commando, Lions Head Commando, Skierland Commando, Tygerberg Commando, and Wynberg Commando were grouped together into Group 1 with its headquarters at Youngsfield Army Base. There were 10 district commandos in this group due to the high population density in the Cape Town area. Group 1, together with Group 2, whose headquarters were in Worcester, and Group 3, 4, 5, and later 31 and 40 were placed under the command of the Western Province Regional Command. There were 11 regional commands, encompassing the whole of the South African landmass, and consisted of over 230 district commandos, each representing a town or district area. When the commandos were disbanded in 2003, 186 commandos, ranging in size from a company to a battalion, existed. Between 50 to 70,000 citizens were members of their local commando. These consisted of people of all races, including 15,134 black Africans, 32,136 whites, 4,626 coloreds, and 328 Asians. In order to understand commando operations, you need to know that members of a commando and their cells belong to three separate categories or groups. The first category, area-bound units. These units or cells were composed of people who lived in towns and cities. When there was an emergency or civil unrest in their area, these commando members were called on to assist. They were issued with a uniform and a rifle for that purpose. Members of these units were trained with police reservists to conduct patrols, roadblocks, follow-up operations, cordon and search operations, and even farm visits. They are called upon to protect vital infrastructure and private property, and to defend against unrest and looting in their locality. The second kind of unit was a home and hearth reaction unit. This is your traditional commando cell, and it was made up of farmers, smallholders, and their labourers, and it was situated in rural areas. Once an incident had been reported on a farm in the area, this commando unit is called in. They are a quick reaction force and will set up roadblocks, assist any wounded, and begin the search for suspects. Home and hearth protection units. Similar to the reaction units, these cells operate in rural areas. The difference being that home and hearth protection units only protect their own properties and were given a rifle if they did not own one. They were, however, integrated into the local contingency plans and communications networks. Their main purpose was to respond to an incident on their own farm and call in assistance. In this way, any would-be attackers were aware that they were attacking a well-defended target and that help was therefore nearby, thereby creating a deterrence to the attack ever being carried out. Functions of a commando. Since their reinception in the 1960s, the function of the commando was primarily that of rear area defense during an emergency. Rear area defense consists in securing supply lines, guarding strategic civilian infrastructure such as power stations and national key points. It also consisted of protecting civilian life and property from enemy hostility in the rural South Africa. This would free up permanent force members and police forces for frontline engagements. The most prominent secondary function for the commandos was that of assisting state departments in a time of crisis, be that crisis droughts or floods, civil disorder, or the outbreak of an epidemic. With regards to assisting state departments, the commando would also assist the police in the maintenance of law and order, treating wounded, and the apprehension of suspects. During times of civil unrest, commando units manned roadblocks, the function of which was to control the entry into vulnerable areas, as well as searching for illegal weapons. They also conducted cordon and search operations in conjunction with police and protected vital infrastructure. All these roles became known as civil defense. Civil defense was primarily the responsibility of local authorities, but each commando played an important role in the civil defense plans of their respective district. These civil defense plans revolved mainly around protecting the local area and its infrastructure with regards to security, firefighting, rescue, and evacuations. The local commando unit was responsible for security within their area, intelligence, and the protection of vulnerable places and essential industries. Most importantly, they would be the first responders during any farm attack or other emergency, such as stock theft. Farmers were connected to one another in a network that provided mutual defense and aid. Intelligence. In order to properly prepare for likely contingencies, commandos required up-to-date intelligence of threats in their area. Each territorial command had an independent intelligence staff component and a senior staff officer, usually a colonel from the South African Army's Intelligence Corps. These men and women were responsible for providing tactical intelligence within their area of responsibility, as well as training commando intelligence personnel at the local, district, and cell level. Although by 2003 the commandos were a relatively benign organization, the association of the term commando with Afrikaner nationalism and the apartheid regime was enough to see the complete disbandment of all these units. In order to ponder the question as to whether a similar structure could ever return, it is necessary also to study another organization with a much more neutral history, the Home Guard of wartime Britain. Immortalized in TV shows like Dad's Army, the British Home Guard played an important role in the early part of World War II. Composed, like the commandos, of older men who were no longer liable for call-up in the regular armed forces, the Home Guard eventually numbered over 1.7 million men. What most people don't know is that the British government played no role in setting up the Home Guard beyond approving of their name. After Britain declared war on Germany in 1939, citizens began to form themselves into detachments without any government orders. In Essex, men not eligible for call-up to the armed forces were coming forward to join the self-styled Legion of Frontiersmen. As more people joined these unofficial organizations, the British government came under increasing pressure to prepare home defense forces against possible German attacks. Churchill agreed he was not at this time the Prime Minister, and Neville Chamberlain's cabinet was not enthused about unofficial militias. Many influential Britons, like Lord Kemsley, a press baron, began to advocate for the entire population to be trained in the use of arms and be given weapons to defend themselves. Even in gun-shy Britain, newspapers began to call on the government to issue ammunition to citizens who owned small arms. Despite official government disapproval, private defence forces began to be formed throughout the country, often sponsored by employers seeking to bolster the defence of their factories. As the fortune of Britain's regular armed forces waned in the Battle of France, the number of volunteers for these unofficial organisations grew exponentially. Eventually, with Churchill coming into office, the official recognition was given for a home defence force to be called the Local Defence Volunteers. Hoping for at least 500,000 volunteers, within a short while 1.5 million citizens had signed up. With his talent for good-sounding names, Churchill ordered the name of the Local Defence Volunteers to be changed to the Home Guard, despite the fact that 1 million LDV armbands had already been printed. The Home Guard in 1940 were an armed, uniformed civilian militia, entirely distinct from the regular armed forces. Volunteers had no recognized military rank, were not subject to military discipline, and could withdraw at any time. Nonetheless, they played a vital role in wartime Britain, the role of rear area defence, same as the Commandos. Fulfilled some of the following duties. They were on the constant lookout for any airborne or seaborne invading forces in their area. They were tasked with guarding and defending key transport intersections and factories in rear areas against fifth columnists or paratroops, to maintain calm and open communication lines in towns, and during the Blitz, the Home Guard was also tasked with seeking out and guarding unexploded bombs, in the course of which over 1,000 of them were killed. They also guarded strategic sites like airfields, factories, and explosive stores. In doing all of this, the Home Guard not only contributed to rear area defence, but they also freed up nearly 1 million British servicemen who would have otherwise have been needed to do the task. These younger men could then direct their energies directly towards fighting the Axis forces and winning the war. By 1944, the Home Guard had transformed from a motley selection of recruits into a well-trained, uniformed military force. Yet by the end of the war, it was no longer needed and was disbanded. But its legacy lived on in India. Following the war, the Home Guard was originally raised to protect citizens in India in any untoward situation, and unlike their British counterparts, the Indian Home Guard still exists to this day. The Indian Home Guard has some of the following functions: to serve as auxiliary to the police and maintain internal security, to help the community in any kind of emergency, like natural disasters or air raids, to function as an emergency force in the defense of their country, to help guard and patrol India's borders, to assist in firefighting and the capture or elimination of dangerous animals. All members are unpaid volunteers who give their spare time to the community, but are paid an allowance when they are called up for service. They are trained by the police in the maintenance of law and order, crime prevention, anti-bandit measures, border control, disaster relief, and firefighting. After their disbandment, the ANC government promised increased police deployment in rural areas. This promise never materialized. Instead, the police force and the general presence of the South African Police Service have decreased in size since then. Correspondingly, farm attacks and other rural crime, like stock theft, have skyrocketed across South Africa. In addition, as recent events in July 2021 showed, there is also no backup force to supplement police when they are overwhelmed. Instead, private citizens have taken it upon themselves to do what they can to protect their communities and neighbourhoods. Whilst the old commando buildings are gutted and falling apart, some private organisations have done what they could to fill the void. AfriForum is a nationwide organisation, and they have 177 neighbourhood or farm watches that roughly correspond to the 186 commandos that were in existence at their disbandment. However, as much as they do great work, the neighbourhood watches are a shell of the former commandos, which often had thousands of members. Town commandos were battalion in size. Most neighbourhood watches would struggle to fill a platoon. It is for this reason that the use of private security has mushroomed across South Africa since 2003. Those who can afford it can keep themselves safe from the rampant crime, but private security cannot fulfill the role of armed and active citizens. Which begs the question, can the Commandos ever be reformed and return, maybe as a home guard? Opposition to the disbandment of the Commando system was vocal, but at the time was confined to political parties seen as representing the white minority. Since their closure, however, the crime rate across South Africa has increased, especially in rural areas, and cross-border smuggling has become rampant. As a result, in addition to parties like the Freedom Front Plus, who always supported their return, some surprising voices have advocated for the Commandos or something similar to come back. In 2022, Defence and Military Veterans Minister Thandi Modise from the ANC made a call for the best aspects of the abandoned commando system to be revived in a citizen safety structure that could be called on to protect not only private effects but also community as well as national effects and property, noting that citizen safety structures can easily be implemented using existing legislation such as the 2002 Defence Act. In 2023, Brigadier General Zoleka Nyabamana, Chief of the Defence Reserves, told Parliament's Joint Standing Committee for Defence that progress in establishing a Mzansi Home Guard had reached an advanced stage of development. In February 2025, Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen advocated for rural safety units to return across the country. And so it is with hope that I make these videos, hoping to do a small part in making this a reality. Join me again next time when I wrap up this 3-part series with my visions for a Home Guard initiative. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.